Hi, I'm Jeannie, and it's time to wake up. If you haven't become a Christian yet, it's time to start thinking about it because our world is going a little bit crazy if you haven't noticed. So, this is what you need to do. First off, you need to realize that you're a sinner and you just can't do it on your own. And then you need to realize that Jesus died and made the sacrifice for your sins. He paid for that, so you don't have to now. You need to accept that gift, and you need to start praying to God. Pray, thanking Him, and find a body of believers, get baptized, find a body of believers that are teaching from the Bible. So when you go into the sermon, you're getting book by book, chapter by chapter, word by word from the pastor. If he's just doing these other kind of big, airy, feel-good kinds of teachings, it's probably not exactly the best way to go. But find someone who can teach you straight from the Bible and stick with that church. A lot of times people are looking for church for socializations. Your church is supposed to be teaching you, mentoring you, discipling you to become more like Christ. There should be a lot of ministries that are helping other people as well. And so it doesn't matter the size, it doesn't matter the community, it just matters that you're being fed the unadulterated Word of God. Now, let's look at chapter 17 in Matthew. It starts with 6 days later, so let's look and see what happened here before that. 6 days after Jesus had told the disciples that he was going to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, experts, and experts in the law, and that he was going to be killed and raised on the third day. And then Peter said, God forbid, Lord, this must not happen to you. And Jesus said, get behind me, Satan. And then he does tell them that if anyone wants to be my follower, they must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Whoever wants his life must lose it, and whoever loses his life because of me will find it. And then he says, the Son of Man will come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and he will reward each person according to what he has done. And he says, there are some standing here who will not experience death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And I did tell you all that there's so many things that people think that mean, but a lot of people think it was pertaining to the Transfiguration. So let's read the Transfiguration. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them privately up a mountain. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. Then Moses and Elijah also appeared before them, talking with him. So Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you want, I will make 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my one dear Son, in whom I take great delight. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they were overwhelmed with fear and threw themselves down with their faces to the ground. But Jesus came and touched them. Get up, he said. Do not be afraid. When they looked up, all they saw was Jesus alone. As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, do not tell anyone about the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. The disciples asked him, why then do the experts in the law say that Elijah must come first? He answered them, Elijah does indeed come first and will restore all things. And I tell you that Elijah has already come, yet they did not recognize him, but they did to him whatever they wanted. In the same way, the Son of Man will suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them about John the Baptist. The Transfiguration experience for the 3 disciples showed 3 things. First, it confirmed to the disciples that the kingdom of heaven was for the future. It also confirmed that Jesus was the divine Messiah. The alteration of his appearance plus his association with Moses and Elijah confirmed his messianic role. And the voice from heaven declared that he was the Son of God. And third, it confirmed that the Messiah must suffer. Just like Moses, when Moses went up to Mount Sinai and he took 3 people with him, Jesus took 3 people with him as well. Moses took with him Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu. And just like Jesus took Peter, James, and John, they were considered the handpicked inner circle of the disciples. Why did he pick those 3? We really don't know why. We just know that he did. It could be because they were further along in their belief systems. It could be that God just knew that these 3 disciples were going to make the biggest difference. We don't really know. Maybe they were going to be the 3 that would respond the most positively. Others might have been too frightened over the experience. So we just don't know why. But we know that he did pick those 3. Now, a lot of people say that this high mountain that they were led up was the same mountain that Moses was on, Mount Sinai. But there's really no evidence for that. It just says a high mountain. So we don't want to make assumptions that aren't there. I just think it's a dangerous thing for people to start making assumptions when there's no evidence in the text for that assumption. So while on that mountain, Jesus transformed. He had a metamorphosis, and it was clear that he was not just a human on earth. He wasn't just going to be a Messiah, a savior for that particular generation, that he was much, much more than that. And the disciples saw this, and Peter speaks up, which the other 2 didn't, but Peter speaks up. Peter speaks up a lot of times when he should have just shut his mouth and paid attention to what was happening. Instead, he speaks up and, oh God, that's great that we're here. Let me build 3 shelters for you and Moses and Elijah. And he interrupted what was taking place to try to, I don't know, why would he do this? Is he trying to make himself more important? Like, I see that this is a special occasion. Let me build these shelters for you all. And the shelters were kind of like, I guess you could say kind of like shrines, but what they were meant to be were a way to remember what had happened, a way to for people to come and look at the particular place and say, this happened here. And so what you maybe like a statue or a monument, but he was rebuked by God. So he saw this bright cloud, and in this bright cloud, it came down and it overshadowed them. So it's a cloud, but it's light, kind of like when the Israelites were leaving Egypt. They followed a cloud by day and a light by night. So I kind of just think maybe it's probably something similar to that. I really don't have any textual evidence to point that way, but it seems like it. So I'm going to say it's similar to that. When the disciples heard this, when the 3 disciples heard this, they threw themselves on the ground with their faces on the ground, and they were afraid. And I'm sure that Peter was probably more afraid than the rest of them, because he was the one who spoke up when he should have just shut his mouth and observed what was happening. Nonetheless, Jesus came and touched them and said, "Don't be afraid." And when they looked up, of course, they see Jesus is by himself. So Peter disrupted whatever was happening, the transfiguration that was happening. And when they saw Jesus, they saw him in his spiritual form. They didn't see him in his human form anymore. So this was pretty major. Paul experienced something very similar as well later on in Acts. And Paul was not one of the 12 disciples originally. And I know it gets a little confusing with who were the 12 disciples sometimes, but Paul was not one of them. So then the experience is over with, so it's time for them to go back to camp. And they're going down the mountain, and the disciples ask Jesus, you know, I thought that Elijah was supposed to come first. And Jesus says, yes, you're right. Elijah is going to come first, and he's going to restore all things. And I'm going to tell you this, Elijah did come already, but nobody recognized him, and they did whatever they wanted to him, which ultimately they put him to death, because that was John the Baptist, and the apostles realized that he was talking about John the Baptist. But when Jesus told them, don't tell anybody about what you saw tonight until after I am raised from the dead. So he's confirming once again that I am going to have to die, and I'm going to have to be raised from the dead. 5 times Matthew recorded Jesus telling his disciples to keep things silent. This was the 5th time, and this is the last time that he tells them to keep it silent. Except they could tell people after he rose from the dead. The temporary silence was important because of popular political views of the Messiah. Jesus had already pointed out that he was supposed to die, but the disciples didn't really hear it. They heard the words, but they didn't understand it. And here Jesus is confirming, I'm going to die, and you can't tell anybody about this incident until I'm raised again. Jesus' resurrection was a unique happening that was going to be undeniable to the people around. They could not dispute that he was dead. They could not dispute that he became alive again. And nothing in the historical records has anybody said that he didn't die or that he didn't actually raise again. The politicians of the time tried to say that the disciples stole the body, but we'll get into that later when we get to that part. But they're saying that the disciples stole the body away in front of these soldiers who were guarding the tomb. So that didn't make any sense. It didn't last long. Anyway, Jesus' transfiguration, what most people think Jesus meant when he said that some of these men here would not die before they see the Son coming in his kingdom. The disciples' failure to heal. When they came to the crowd, a man came to them, knelt before them, and said, Lord, have mercy on my son, because he has seizures and suffers terribly, for he often falls into the fire and into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they were not able to heal him. Jesus answered, you unbelieving and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you? How much longer must I endure you? Bring him here to me. Then Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was healed from that moment. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, why couldn't we cast it out? He told them, it was because of your little faith. I tell you the truth, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. So with this incident, we see that this man had his son, and this demon was causing him to go into a fit and fall into waters or fire. It's like the demon was trying to kill this child. So he took his son to the disciples, and obviously from what I just read, they weren't able to get the demon out. So this man is desperate. And he came to Jesus saying, your disciples couldn't help us, maybe you can. And Jesus was a little frustrated with the situation, the lack of belief. Was it the lack of belief on the Father, or was it the lack of belief on the disciples? Because he says, you unbelieving and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you? How much longer must I endure you? So those are pretty harsh words. Those are pretty harsh words from Jesus. But Jesus just used his words. He rebuked the demon, and the demon came out of him. That was it. And we've seen that so many times. He just says, get out of him or leave. And they have to They have to do what he says. And he gave us that same power, by the way. We have that power too. You can rebuke demons and you can make them leave people or leave your house or vicinities. You have that power as well. I just want to point out, though, that you need to truly believe it. And also, Jesus never, and the disciples never bind demons. They never say, I bind you, Satan, and I bind you, demon. They never say that. Binding means to tie closely to you, and loosing means to destroy, break up. And so you don't want to bind a demon when you're trying to expel it from someplace, because that means you are binding yourself to it. So don't do that. But you do have the power, just like Jesus did here, to tell demonic creatures, to tell evil to leave. In the name of Jesus, leave. Jesus has that power, and Jesus gave it to his children. All right, so I digress. Let me move on. The disciples asked why they weren't able to do it. And Jesus told them it's because of your disbelief. I'm telling you guys, if you will just believe, you could tell a mountain to move from here to there and it will move. He said, even if it's just a small enough a belief, small like a size of a mustard seed, but you truly believe it, then you can do these miraculous things as well. Now, in Mark, when you look at Mark, it has the same reference to this story. And Jesus adds in Mark that this kind does not come out except by fasting and prayer. So if you have to encounter something like that, it might be a good idea to fast and pray. You should always pray. You should always pray. Jesus even said, pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. But when you're talking about evil influences, you should pray and fast and pray. When you know, I have a friend right now who's going through thing after thing after thing after thing after thing after thing, extraordinarily bad things happening to her that should not be happening. Does not normally happen in a human's life all at once, but these things are. And to me, that's an obvious demonic presence trying to stop her from doing what God has called her to do. And so fasting and prayer is very much needed, not just by her, but by other people. Just like the people who brought in the man who couldn't walk himself to go see Jesus, and they brought him in and took him down through the roof. And just like Lazarus, when he called forth Lazarus from the grave, and he had to command people to go and take his grave clothes off of him. Other people have to do these things for you sometimes, because bad things have been placed upon us by others, either demonically or by other people who are being used by spiritual forces to cause us harm. And we need our friends and family to pray and to help us to release ourselves sometimes. So having this faith of a mustard seed, that would be like a faith that you have when you first become a Christian. I don't know if you all remember, those of you who are Christians, if you remember when you first became a Christian and the excitement that you had and the change in your life, the change in perspective. I mean, for me, it was just this joy and whole change of perspective, a change of, it was unbelievable for me. And my faith then was very, very strong. But that was 44 years ago that I became a Christian. And since then, and a lot of people stop there. They became a Christian, they're all excited, and they stop there. But Jesus wants us to continue to grow. And Just like when he talked about the talents, when I give you something, I expect interest. When I give you something, I expect it to grow. All the vines that aren't producing will be cut off. I expect you to grow. I expect you to show fruit. So as a Christian, you should be studying, you should be wanting more, you should be having a deeper understanding of what Jesus is talking about this, also about the spiritual world that we live in. Because Paul wrote in Ephesians, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and spiritual leaders of this world and spirits of this world. So we need to have a better understanding that that's where our battle is. All right, I digress again. Sorry, y'all. Verse 22. When they gathered together in Galilee, Jesus told them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised. And they became greatly distressed. So in other times when Jesus said this, it was almost like veiled. It was almost like they heard what he was saying, but it wasn't crystal clear to them what he meant. Here he says it very clearly. This is going to happen to me. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised. Now, they may not realize that on the third day he will be raised meant that he was going to come back to life and be living again. Because he said raised, and who knows what that means. Maybe they're just going to raise him up, put him on something, a pedestal or something. I don't know. But he was very crystal clear in telling him this. This little section, 22 and 23, is kind of like, just like it almost seems like a standalone message, like just out of the blue. Okay, by the way, let me tell you this. Let me get this through your thick skull. I'm going to be killed. They're going to kill me, and I'm going to raise again on the third day. So even though he was being direct, he was still being a little bit ambiguous with the raised business, but he's just trying to get them ready for what's about to occur. In verses 24 through 27, after they arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and said, your teacher pays a double drachma tax, doesn't he? And he said, yes. When Peter came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first. What do you think, Simon? From whom do the earthly kings collect tolls or taxes? From their sons or from foreigners? After Peter said from foreigners, Jesus said to him, then the sons are free. But so we don't offend them, go to the lake and throw out a hook. Take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take that and give it to them for me and you. So before Peter could come in and say, oh, these tax collectors are getting on us, Jesus, you need to pay your taxes, Jesus presents him with a question. Who pays the tax? Is it the son or is it the foreigners? And of course, Peter says the foreigners. So Jesus changed the tax from a religious one to a civil one to make his point clearer. Jesus' point was that as the sons of kings are exempt from their taxes their father imposes, so he was exempt from the taxes his father imposed. He meant the temple tax. The temple really belonged to God. Jesus was teaching Peter the implications of his deity. He was not teaching Peter to fulfill his civic responsibility. Even though Jesus was exempt from the tax, he still paid it because he didn't want to offend anyone, which is kind of funny because he offended a lot of people. He offended a lot of those people at the temple. So God had declared Jesus clearly was his son at the Transfiguration, as well as at Jesus' baptism. But the people, the priests at the temple did not consider Jesus to be God's son. So to the disciples, Jesus was clearly God's son. And clearly the temple belonged to him. He still was willing to pay his taxes. And to pay his taxes and to also prove that he is the Son of God and shouldn't have to pay taxes, he tells Peter, go catch a fish. The first one you catch, open it up, and you're going to find the drachma in there. Take it and pay not only my tax, but your tax as well, Peter. And so Peter did. He goes, he finds the fish, he pays the tax. It's all a miracle. It's kind of cool. All right, that's it for chapter 17. And now it's time for current events. Our current event this time is back to Canada. Back to Canada because you ever hear the phrase, you gotta have an open mind? And did you ever hear the counter phrase, your mind is so open that your brain is falling out? Sometimes I think that that's happening to people, especially in Canada. In Canada, they're having a really big problem with people stealing cars and also breaking into people's homes after they get home and beating people up, even killing them to get their keys so that they can steal their cars. So this is what they are saying that you need to do. When you get home, leave your wallet and your keys right at the front door. So when they break in, they don't even have to talk to you. They can just grab your money, grab your keys, and go out and take your car and leave in peace. And that's solving the problem of people getting beat up, getting killed from other people who are taking their cars. What? Are you serious? Really? This is the way we're going to take care of these criminals, instead of telling the criminals, okay, if you do this, we're going to catch you, we're going to throw you in jail, we're going to throw you in prison, maybe we'll even sign you up for the Canadian MAID, medically assisting in death. So they're going to, sign them up for MAID if they have to be killing or hurting people to steal cars. If they're stealing a car, please, I can't believe it. I can't believe that. That is so outrageous. So this is how wacky our world is getting, y'all. Our world is getting wacky. It is getting wackier and wackier and wackier. We have to wake up. Doing the right thing, protecting your family and protecting your home and your valuables are now becoming illegal. Somebody can come and kill your family and take all your stuff. And if you fight back, if you shoot them in the process, you're the one who's going to be getting prosecuted if you live in Canada, because you're protecting your family and the items that you need to take care of your family, because you need a vehicle to get to work, you need a vehicle to go buy groceries, you need a vehicle to take them to the doctor. And you're the one who is punished for trying to protect yourself. And these people who are killing, who are hurting, who are stealing, they're being rewarded. They're being rewarded for what they're doing. And the officials are trying to make it easier on them. So you just leave all your stuff at the front door so they don't even have to come in and bother you. They shouldn't have to ask you for that. That's crazy, y'all. Wake up. We need to wake up. All right. Thank you for listening, and God bless you all.